This virtual learning cast session provides our perspective on the overall framework for conducting research on graduate teaching assistant teaching professional development, or what we refer to as GTA TPD. It does not cover all the details about how to conduct research on this area, but it is meant to help you start thinking about the research you might conduct. More details on conducting GTA TPD's research will be provided as part of the pre-BioTAP Scholar Research Development session homework and at the actual RDS session. You certainly can also investigate research approaches on your own, and we encourage you to do just that. You can complete this presentation at your own pace, pausing and considering information as you go through it. However, please note that there will be several pieces of homework that need to be completed before you arrive at the RDS, so make sure to leave enough time. So, what will you learn in this presentation? Overall, we want you to have an understanding of the three outcomes of a GTA TPD program that we think should be the focus of research. Those outcomes are GTA cognition, GTA teaching practice, and impact on undergraduates. We will also give examples for research questions that you might ask in association with each of these three outcomes. And finally, we want to provide you with a very brief overview of how you might approach data collection for these outcomes. The outcome variables that we will focus on in this presentation were presented as part of an article published in CBE Life Sciences Education by members of the BioTAP network. Here we show the figure from which we are drawing this information, and we encourage you to obtain a copy of the article to read in advance of the RDS. The reference for the article is provided here for you. For now, we will step away from the boxes shown in yellow and green and only focus on the boxes shown in blue. These are the boxes that represent the outcome variables previously mentioned. Note that two of the boxes are concerned with GTAs and one with undergraduates. Shown here is a simplified version of the three outcome boxes from the previous figure. Overall, when we consider assessing the effectiveness of a GTA TPD program, we want you to think about three potential outcomes that you could measure: GTA cognition, GTA teaching practice, and impact on undergraduates. Note that as you move from left to right, it becomes harder to collect data on the different aspects of your GTA TPD program. It is easier to study GTA cognition than GTA teaching practice or impact on undergraduates. GTA cognition is focused on the knowledge and understandings that GTAs have about teaching. These are ideas that they bring into any teaching program and that have the potential to be impacted by professional development or by teaching experiences. GTA cognition can be assessed by gathering data on what GTAs know about teaching, such as how to lead group discussions or identify a misconception. You can also assess how GTAs feel about teaching, which is often considered to be attitudes towards teaching. This would include, for example, GTA's perspectives about leading group discussions or student misconceptions. Finally, you can assess GTA beliefs about teaching, which could include why GTAs use group discussions, how they think misconceptions impact instruction, or even how confident they feel about their own teaching using group discussions or misconceptions as teaching tools. GTA teaching practice has to do with how GTAs put their knowledge, feelings, and beliefs in action. For example, you could assess how GTAs approach planning for a lab or discussion section, or even an entire course. Or you could assess their teaching approaches as they enact their teaching plan, or you could study the assessments that they use as part of their teaching. The last outcome variable is called undergraduate impact, and it encompasses anything where you measure the impact of GTA's teaching on the students they instruct. So for example, you could assess how much students of a particular GTA learned. This could include student knowledge or skills. Or you could assess how many students a GTA instructed stay in their major over time. You could also assess the interest level of the students in the topic that a GTA taught. With this overview of the three outcomes of a GTA TPD program that we think should be the focus of research, let's discuss some possible research questions. The outcomes that you measure for your project are a direct reflection of the types of questions you might seek to answer about your TPD program. To give you some examples of the types of research questions that could be aligned with each outcome, we're going to present a generic scenario and show you some possible questions you might ask that would be related to one of the outcomes. In other words, there are many correct ways to approach your research project. The main consideration is, what do you want to know? Once you have this consideration in place, then you can create a research question that will in turn guide the possibilities for how you might collect your data. You might assess one outcome, two outcomes, or three outcomes, depending on the time and resources you have to devote to the project. In our generic scenario, a researcher wants to collect data on whether the GTA TPD program that she is currently enacting, which consists of 3 workshops on active learning, problem solving, and backward design, is improving the teaching of the GTAs who are attending the workshops. Let's start by probing the outcome of GTA cognition. The researcher might ask whether the workshops she is offering are associated with any increased GTA knowledge of particular teaching practices, such as active learning. Or she might wonder whether the workshops she is offering change any of the GTA's attitudes towards active learning. Finally, she could ask whether GTA's confidence in their ability to enact a particular teaching practice, such as active learning, differs from a group of GTAs who did not participate in the workshops. The researcher might also be interested in questions that are focused on how GTAs apply their knowledge to their teaching. This addresses the GTA teaching practice outcome. For example, she might want to know whether GTAs who participated in her workshops were applying the idea of backward design to their planning for teaching, and if so, how. She might be interested in whether information about teaching using problem solving is being used more by the GTAs who attended the workshops than by those who did not attend them. Or she might be interested in investigating how GTAs who participated in her workshops are assessing student problem-solving abilities. Finally, outcome 3. The researcher may have research questions that are more focused on how GTA's teaching impacts the undergraduate students being taught. She might be interested in whether the undergraduate students taught by a GTA who attended the workshops gain more problem-solving knowledge and skills than the students of other GTAs who did not participate in the TPD program. She may be interested in whether the students of GTAs who have engaged in the TPD program are more likely to be retained in the biology major. Or she may be interested in whether the students of GTAs participating in her program are more interested in problem solving than the students of other GTAs. Prior to the RDS, you will be asked to generate a research question or ideas for research questions about your GTA TPD program. It is important to define these research questions and ideas because they will guide both the variables on which you choose to collect data as well as the actual data collection approaches you use. There are multiple approaches used to collect data in science education research. 1. You can collect data through written prompt by using measurement instruments such as surveys, inventories, and tests. 2. You can collect data through spoken prompts by conducting interviews and facilitating think-aloud assignments using either pre-planned or semi-constructed protocols. You can also collect data from objects created by participants such as portfolios and educational artifacts. Other data collection approaches include observations, such as watching GTAs teach their classes, correspondence among GTAs about teaching, physical measurements, such as heart rate measurements of GTAs before and after teaching, and institutional or programmatic data sets that can be mined for variables of interest, like student grades or retention. When identifying variables and choosing data collection approaches, it's important to remember that some researchers go into a research project with clearly defined variables of interest to investigate. This is research based on hypothesis testing with predetermined variables. This means they can use predetermined methods or instruments for data collection. Other researchers, however, need to first explore a system to gain an understanding of what variables may be of interest. This is research based on hypothesis generation. In this case, data collection may be more exploratory or observational in order to identify the variables of interest. If the variables you want to measure are predetermined by your specific hypothesis, you might select measurement instruments that other researchers have used to measure those same variables. These instruments would be identified through studying the research literature. For example, you may choose to use a survey to measure GTA understanding of active learning techniques, or you may choose to conduct interviews with GTAs to elicit more in-depth information about active learning approaches. If your variables need to be identified, you might select more exploratory measurement approaches such as focus groups that ask GTAs about how they use backward design in their teaching, or perhaps gathering GTA lesson plans as a participant-created object in order to analyze GTA's use of backward design in their teaching. Knowing the variables in advance does not make the research project better, but it does make it more likely to lend itself to hypothesis testing or exploring cause and effect. Finally, you will also need to make decisions about when and how to collect your data. In a true experimental research design, treatments and controls would be established, and GTAs would be assigned to each randomly. These types of studies are difficult in practice, however, and most education research with treatments are often called quasi-experimental designs. In these designs, there are treatments, but participants are not assigned to each randomly. Designs such as these would be used in the case where some GTAs choose to participate in a new GTA TPD program, while others choose not to participate. You can compare these groups, but biases in the populations means that it is difficult to determine whether the program itself caused any of the identified outcomes. There are also non-experimental designs where there is no manipulation of the variables, but data are collected to make inferences about how a system functions, how people change over time, or even how variables may be related to each other. Generally, you can use any of the data collection approaches we previously mentioned for all three different designs. Determining when to collect your data is also a choice you will need to make. Will you collect data only after the TPD program, before and after the TPD program, or multiple times over a semester to assess changes over time? These are specific decisions that we will plan at the RDS. Remember, the guiding rule is always to go back to your research question. A solid research question should guide all your choices in data collection approaches and research design. We hope this VLCcast has provided you with a solid foundation to start designing your GTA TPD research project. To expand its utility, we ask you to reflect on the questions shown here as part of your pre-RDS session homework. We will provide you with information about how to respond to these questions in upcoming correspondence. Finally, here are 2 resources that may be useful to you as supplemental reading. See you at the RDS session!